Hey, Silent Pages fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe. Now stay with us. The story begins. The gravel road wound like a narrow ribbon through the rolling hills of Tuscany, the late afternoon sun painting the vineyards in shades of amber and olive. A black sports car tore along it, tires kicking up clouds of dust that shimmered in the golden light. Dominic stepped out, immaculately dressed, briefcase in hand, the sharp lines of his tailored suit contrasting with the rustic beauty around him. The air smelled of sun-baked earth, crushed leaves, and the faint, sweet tang of ripening grapes. This was not Wall Street. This was a battlefield of a different kind. He paused at the edge of the driveway, taking in the sprawling estate of Castello di Sole. Centuries-old stone walls, ivy climbing the weathered facades, and rows of vines stretching across sunlit hills. He could almost feel the heartbeat of the land, the history etched into every brick and every row of grapes. It was breathtaking, and it was his next conquest. Yet, even as he adjusted his cufflinks, there was a flicker of curiosity, a pang of anticipation. There was something about the place, something intangible, that made him aware that this was not going to be a straightforward acquisition. Alice appeared at the gate, her posture rigid, arms crossed. The sun caught the edges of her hair, setting it aglow in reddish-gold strands. Her eyes, sharp and unflinching, met his, and Dominic felt a rare flicker of unease. She did not smile, she did not welcome him. Instead, she radiated the unmistakable aura of defiance, the kind only someone truly tied to their land could possess. "You've come for the papers," she said, voice steady, almost cold, but laced with controlled anger. Dominic raised an eyebrow, closing the distance in careful steps. "I have, and I expect your cooperation." Her laugh was sharp, carrying over the quiet rustle of the vines. "Cooperation? You think this is just a transaction? This is my family, my legacy. I don't sign." He studied her. She was fearless, unyielding. Most people crumbled under authority, under intimidation, under the weight of his reputation. But not her, not Alice. She stood like a sentinel between him and the vineyard, and for the first time in years, Dominic felt a flicker of challenge. Something that intrigued him, made the familiar thrill of business acquisition pale in comparison. "Then we proceed differently," he said, voice calm, deliberate. "The legal team will finalize the notices if you refuse." "The vineyard is not yours," she interrupted sharply. "Not yet. And even if the law gives you leverage, you will never have my consent. Every inch of this place, every grape, every stone, you will have to earn it." Her conviction was palpable, almost tangible, and Dominic felt a rare emotion creep through his meticulously constructed defenses. Respect. And then, even more dangerous, a spark of fascination. He allowed a slow, deliberate smile. "Very well. Then I suppose we shall see who wins." For a moment, silence fell between them. The only sounds were the rustle of grape leaves in the wind, the distant cry of a cicada, and the faint creak of wooden shutters swinging in the breeze. The vineyard seemed to hold its breath, aware that this meeting was the start of a contest that would test pride, endurance, and the boundaries of human will. Dominic stepped forward, offering a hand, almost instinctively. "Dominic Fairchild." Alice's gaze did not waver. She allowed a pause, then extended her own hand, firm, unyielding. "Alice Romano. And don't expect civility to save you." The first day of the 30-day wager began in earnest. Each knew that the stakes were more than legal. They were personal, emotional, and infinitely complex. Dominic would not simply buy the vineyard. Alice would not simply defend it. Their worlds, clashing in the sunlight, were about to ignite in a slow-burning fire of rivalry, grudging admiration, and, perhaps, something neither had yet dared to name. He observed her as she turned to retreat inside, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she carried herself with measured grace, despite the heat of the day and the work that awaited. For Dominic, this was unfamiliar territory, not the boardrooms or trading floors, but an emotional battlefield where strategy would matter less than endurance, cunning, and human connection. Dominic exhaled, feeling the weight of the 30 days stretched before him. This was no longer just business. It was war, it was a challenge, it was a test of character. And for the first time in his life, he wondered if he might actually lose. The sun dipped lower, painting the vineyard in long, shifting shadows. The first day of the wager had begun, and neither Dominic nor Alice knew that by the time the sun rose again, their lives would already be subtly and irrevocably changed. The morning air in Tuscany carried a chill unusual for late summer, as if the land itself sensed the tension building over Castello di Sole. Dominic had spent the night in a local inn, but sleep had eluded him. Every fiber of his being was alert, mind racing with calculations, probabilities, and contingencies. But here, among vineyards and centuries-old stone, logic had its limits. Alice met him at breakfast, a basket of freshly baked bread in her hands, and eyes sharper than the knives he used to wield in the boardroom. She did not offer pleasantries. Instead, she assessed him, reading the tension in his shoulders, the faint tremor in his fingers, a side effect, perhaps, of unfamiliar physical labor. "You're too comfortable in your suits," she said, voice lightly mocking but edged with warning. "You won't survive here unless you learn what it means to work with your hands, with the earth. And no shortcuts." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "I can adapt. I've faced challenges before." Alice smirked, crossing her arms. "This isn't Wall Street. You won't win with charm or leverage. You'll win, or fail, by sweat, by endurance, by understanding what it means to care for something that isn't a number on a spreadsheet." He leaned back slightly, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "And if I prove myself?" Alice's eyes gleamed with a challenge that ignited an unexpected thrill in him. "Then maybe I'll consider signing those papers. But I propose a wager, 30 days. 30 days living as one of us. You will wake with the sun, work in the fields, carry crates, learn the soil, and live without your gadgets, your assistants, or your boardroom leverage. At the end of it, if you endure, and I mean truly endure, I will sign the vineyard over. If you fail, the debts are voided, and I walk away unscathed." Dominic felt an unexpected pulse of adrenaline. This was audacious, risky, thrilling. He was a man who calculated probabilities and outcomes. Yet here was a challenge that couldn't be reduced to numbers alone. 30 days, he said slowly, considering. "No interference from me, no cheating, no shortcuts?" Alice's lips curved in a rare, approving smile. "No cheating, no shortcuts, and you will learn to respect the land, or you will fail." The terms set, the wager began in earnest. Dominic's first steps into the vineyard were accompanied by a sinking realization. The air smelled different here, heavier with earth, dust, and the faint tang of fermentation. The morning sun glinted off the vines, but its warmth was deceptive. What it promised in beauty, it demanded in labor. Alice guided him through the tasks, pruning, lifting crates of grapes heavier than he imagined, tying vines, learning the precise rhythm of water, soil, and sun. Each task was a small crucible, testing not just endurance but patience, humility, and willingness to surrender control. By midday, Dominic's suit was replaced with worn denim and a linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands blistered, arms aching. He gritted his teeth as Alice offered a brief, amused observation. "Not bad for a city shark," she said, gesturing to the sweat streaked across his forehead. "But the vineyard doesn't forgive shortcuts. You'll learn that soon enough." The day stretched long and relentless. Cicadas hummed overhead, and the sun blazed down, casting the vineyard in harsh lines of light and shadow. Dominic's mind, trained for spreadsheets and power plays, fought to adjust. Every muscle, every nerve protested, yet a strange exhilaration ran beneath the fatigue. He was alive in a way the sterile halls of finance had never allowed. By evening, they paused, sitting on a low stone wall, the sky streaked with pink and violet. Dominic, breathing hard, looked over the rows of vines, now golden in the dying light. Alice's gaze met his, curious and calculating, but something warmer lingered in her eyes. "You're learning faster than I expected," she said. "But endurance is more than strength. It's about patience, attention, understanding what matters beyond profit. Do you understand that yet?" Dominic hesitated, then nodded. "I think I'm beginning to. Not fully, but enough to know I need to try." Alice smiled faintly, a hint of pride hidden in the corners of her mouth. "Then maybe, just maybe, you'll survive the 30 days. The sun set behind the Tuscan hills, a fiery promise over Castello di Sole. Dominic knew that the Real challenge was not merely the labor, but the slow unraveling of his control, the dawning awareness that winning this wager might demand something more profound than anything Wall Street had ever asked of him: vulnerability, respect, and perhaps connection with Alice. 2 weeks lay ahead, 30 days to test endurance, pride, and heart. And as Dominic looked at the vineyard stretching endlessly before him, he realized this was no ordinary challenge. This was a reckoning, one that could change everything: his life, his choices, and perhaps even the cold fortress around his heart. The sun had climbed high over Tuscany, bathing the vineyard in a relentless, golden light. Dominic adjusted the brim of his hat, sweat dampening the back of his neck, the denim of his shirt sticking uncomfortably to his skin. For someone accustomed to the polished corridors of Wall Street, the intensity of labor here was almost cruel. Every muscle protested, every movement required effort that no suit, no assistant, no shortcut could alleviate. Alice moved with the ease of someone born among the vines, hands deftly tying branches, inspecting the soil, adjusting the trellises. Her energy was relentless, each motion purposeful, precise, a language of care and expertise that Dominic struggled to understand. "Watch the angle here," she instructed, gesturing to a vine that drooped dangerously under the weight of ripening grapes. "A careless cut, and you ruin the yield for weeks. Everything matters." Dominic gritted his teeth, lifting a crate heavier than any briefcase he had ever carried. Blisters formed immediately along his palms, a burning reminder that pride alone would not win this wager. He stumbled slightly under the weight, and Alice's laugh, sharp and teasing, sliced through the air. "Careful," she said, eyebrows raised. "Even sharks fall when they forget the terrain." He shot her a glance, a mixture of irritation and reluctant amusement. "I assure you, I'm no ordinary shark." Alice smirked, tying a vine with one hand while resting the other on her hip. "We'll see. The vineyard doesn't care what kind of shark you are. Only results matter. And patience. And respect." Hours passed. Dominic moved through row after row, hands smeared with dirt, sweat soaking his clothes, muscles screaming in protest. Each task, from pruning to lifting to inspecting, demanded not just physical effort but constant attention. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, a strange satisfaction began to stir. He could see the immediate results of his labor. Vines straightened, grapes carefully handled, the soil nurtured. No algorithm, no balance sheet had ever offered him such tangible reward. During a break, Dominic sat on a low stone wall, breathing heavily, wiping his brow with a dirt-stained sleeve. Alice perched beside him, unperturbed by the heat or effort. The contrast between them could not have been more stark. Him, stiff and awkward in labor; she, fluid and commanding, at home in the dirt. "You're improving," she said, voice softer now, almost approving. "Faster than I expected for a city boy." Dominic allowed himself a small smile, though it was tempered by fatigue. "I may not know much about vineyards yet, but I'm learning. Slowly." Alice's gaze met his, sharp yet assessing. "Slowly is all you need, as long as you don't give up. Most people give up before they even start to understand the land. You're stubborn enough to last, but stubbornness alone won't save you. Respect and patience matter more." Dominic nodded, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He had spent his life building empires, conquering markets, and mastering strategy. Yet here, in the fields under the harsh Tuscan sun, he was powerless in the face of something older, alive, and entirely indifferent to his reputation. He realized for the first time that strength was not enough. He needed humility, endurance, and understanding. By late afternoon, the vineyard glowed in warm, muted tones. Dust clung to Dominic's skin, and his hands were raw, the scent of earth and crushed grapes staining him in a way no suit or cologne could mask. Yet as he observed the rows he had tended, a small sense of accomplishment warmed him. He was beginning to grasp the rhythm of the land, the quiet dialogue between sun, soil, and vine, a dialogue that Alice had mastered, and one he had only just begun to hear. Alice leaned back against a post, her eyes scanning the vineyard with a mixture of pride and amusement. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll start on irrigation. You'll learn to read the soil and water the vines precisely. No more guessing, no shortcuts." Dominic swallowed, knowing he would endure it. The 30-day wager had become far more than a challenge. It was an awakening. Every blister, every ache, every admonishing glance from Alice chipped away at the Wall Street persona, leaving him exposed to something unfamiliar: humility, effort, and the quiet pull of respect for the woman guiding him. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the vineyard, Dominic realized that the first real battle of the wager had been fought, not in contracts or negotiations, but in dirt, sweat, and determination. And though the days ahead promised equal struggle, he felt, for the first time, that he might be able to endure. Not just for the vineyard, not just to win a wager, but because he had begun to understand something essential: that some victories were measured not in money or power, but in connection, respect, and the slow, grinding rhythm of life lived fully. The cicadas hummed around them as the last light faded, and Dominic looked at Alice, catching her eyes for a fleeting moment. There was challenge there, yes, but also something else, an unspoken acknowledgement that the real game had only just begun. And in that moment, beneath the vast Tuscan sky, the 30-day wager ceased to be merely a contest. It had become a crucible, one that would test endurance, character, and, in ways neither of them yet understood, the heart itself. Night had fallen over Castello di Sole, draping the vineyard in shadows and silvered moonlight. The air was cooler now, carrying the earthy scent of soil and the faint sweetness of ripening grapes. The cicadas had quieted, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cry of an owl. After a long day of grueling work, Dominic and Alice found themselves at the far edge of the vineyard, carrying crates of grapes together, their movements in silent coordination. The exhaustion in Dominic's muscles was matched only by the unfamiliar stillness in his mind. On Wall Street, the end of a day brought a rush of adrenaline, a sense of victory or defeat measured in numbers and contracts. Here, in the quiet night, there was no applause, no scoreboard, only presence, and the steady rhythm of work alongside someone who seemed both a guide and an enigma. Alice glanced at him, her features softened by the moonlight, yet still precise, alert, commanding. "You're not used to this," she observed gently, adjusting a crate so it didn't tilt. "I'm learning," Dominic replied, voice rough from dust and exertion. "Though I admit, I never expected to feel so connected to the work itself, to the land." She didn't speak immediately, letting the words linger between them. Then she said, quietly, "It's not just work. It's life. This vineyard, it demands patience, attention, respect. It teaches those who are willing to listen. Most people never hear its lessons." Dominic stopped for a moment, setting down the crate, and looked across the rows. The shadows stretched long and deep, the moonlight reflecting off the leaves in a delicate shimmer. He felt a strange mix of awe and humility. "And you've listened all your life," he said. "You understand it, and it guides you?" Alice tilted her head, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. "It guides me, yes, but it doesn't forgive laziness or arrogance. I've seen too many try and fail because they think they can conquer it with force or shortcuts. You might last, because you're stubborn enough to endure. But stubbornness isn't everything." The air between them shifted subtly, charged with unspoken words, fleeting touches, and the intimacy of shared labor. Dominic felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't allowed himself in years: trust. And with trust came vulnerability, a concept foreign to him, yet increasingly irresistible. He glanced at her, noting the way her hands moved, precise and confident, the way her eyes softened when she was focused on the vineyard, and how fiercely she protected every vine. I understand a little," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "Not everything, but enough to see why this matters to you so deeply." Alice's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. For a moment, the air was filled not with words, but with the hum of night life in the vineyard, the quiet acknowledgement of two people standing at the edge of a fragile trust. "Good," she said finally, voice low. "Because understanding is the first step, and it will take more than one night to earn respect. Or friendship. Or—" She trailed off, letting the pause hang deliberately. Dominic's chest tightened. He knew exactly what she implied, though neither spoke it aloud. It was not attraction in its familiar form, not yet. It was recognition of the other's humanity, strength, and dedication. He felt a flicker of warmth, a sense that this night, shared in silence and labor, had begun to break down walls he hadn't realized he'd built so high. They continued their work in companionable silence, the moonlight casting delicate shadows over their hands and the crates of grapes. Dominic found himself stealing glances at her, how she moved, how she breathed, the way the vineyard seemed to reflect in her eyes. He realized he wanted to understand not just the vineyard, but her, the woman who had challenged him from the first day. Hours passed. The crates were emptied, the grapes sorted, and for the first time in weeks, Dominic felt a sense of calm he hadn't known since before Wall Street. Alice paused beside him, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "You're different at night," she said softly. "Less guarded. More human." Dominic allowed himself a small, rueful smile. "Perhaps the vineyard is more honest than the world I come from. It doesn't care about power, strategy, or reputation. Only effort, attention, and respect." Alice's smile deepened faintly, a rare acknowledgement, almost approval. "Then maybe you'll learn more than you thought. 30 days is longer than you realize. There's more than work to test you." As they walked back to the villa together, the cool night air wrapping around them, Dominic felt the subtle shift inside himself, the slow dismantling of old certainties, the recognition that endurance was as much about emotional resilience as physical labor. He realized that the wager was no longer simply a contest over a vineyard. It was shaping him, forcing him to confront pride, humility, and the stirring possibility of connection with someone who refused to be conquered. That night, as he lay in the small guest room at the villa, muscles aching but mind alive, Dominic reflected on the day. For the first time, he understood the rhythm of the land, the cadence of work and patience, and the intricate web of trust and challenge woven between him and Alice. The 30 days stretched ahead, daunting and demanding, but he no longer felt entirely unprepared. He had survived one day, one challenge, and in doing so, glimpsed something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation not of victory, but of discovery. And as the night deepened, with the vineyard silent and glowing under the moon, Dominic realized that the real wager had only just begun, not over grapes, not over contracts, but over hearts, patience, and understanding. The following morning, the vineyard smelled different, alive in a way Dominic hadn't noticed before. The air carried the subtle tang of ripening grapes, the crisp bite of dewy leaves, and the faint metallic scent of the soil after a light summer rain. Dominic wiped sweat from his brow, muscles still sore from the previous days, but his mind was sharper now, attuned to the rhythm of the vineyard. Alice was already there, kneeling among the vines, examining clusters with meticulous care. "Today," she said without looking up, "you'll learn to taste, not analyze. To understand, not control." Dominic's brow furrowed. "Taste? I'm a businessman. I make decisions based on data, projections, probability. Taste is subjective." Alice's gaze finally met his, steady and unwavering. "Taste is understanding the land, the sun, the season, the work put into each vine. You can't quantify it. You must feel it, listen to it, respect it." He followed her into the old stone wine cellar, the cool air a relief from the afternoon heat. The room smelled of oak, fermenting grapes, and the faint musk of years, the kind of history that could not be measured in charts or numbers. Alice uncorked a bottle, pouring a deep red into 2 glasses. She handed one to him, her hand brushing his, and Dominic felt a small jolt of awareness at the contact. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Don't think about flavor profiles. Don't try to categorize. Just feel." He did as she said, lifting the glass to his lips, letting the liquid coat his tongue. At first, all he could taste was sharpness, acidity, a fleeting bitterness. But as he breathed in, as he focused, he began to notice subtlety. The earthiness of the soil, the hint of sun on the grapes, the whisper of the wind that had caressed the vines. It was overwhelming and grounding at once. Alice watched him closely, her expression unreadable, but her eyes softened as he exhaled, eyes still closed, finally letting himself absorb the complexity. "Do you understand now?" she asked softly. Dominic nodded slowly. "It's alive. Every sip tells a story. I didn't know wine could speak." Alice allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "It speaks because someone listens. Because someone cares enough to understand the work behind it. That's what this vineyard is. That's why I fight for it." For a long moment, they stood there, the only sounds the faint drip of wine from the bottle and the quiet hum of the cellar. Dominic felt a shift inside him, a subtle, profound recognition that he was no longer an outsider here. The vineyard, the work, Alice herself, they were beginning to penetrate his carefully constructed walls. He opened his eyes and met hers. I never expected to feel anything like this. Not in my life." Alice's eyes held his, unflinching. "It's only the beginning. You'll feel more if you keep listening, if you keep paying attention." They tasted another glass together, this time in silence, letting the wine speak between them. The subtle connection, the shared understanding of the craft, sparked something neither dared to name yet. There was respect, curiosity, and the first ember of something warmer, an awareness that the rivalry of the past days was slowly transforming into something more complex, more intimate. Later, outside the cellar, Dominic picked up a fallen grape from the dusty ground, rolling it between his fingers, tasting the faint sweetness and tang. "I never realized," he admitted quietly, "how much work goes into this. Every vine, every grape, it's not just wine. It's life." Alice rested her hand lightly on his arm, a gesture small but deliberate. And understanding that life, that's the first step toward truly earning respect. And maybe more than respect. Dominic met her gaze, the soft evening light glinting in her eyes. For the first time in decades, he felt unguarded, open, not calculating, not controlling, just present. And the realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. As they walked back through the vineyard toward the villa, the air was filled with the scent of crushed grapes and soil, softer now, intertwined with the subtle promise of evening jasmine. The 30-day wager had begun to reshape him, not just physically, but emotionally, ethically, and perhaps even romantically. The day had been a turning point. The work, the wine, the lessons, and Alice herself had begun to break through the fortress around his heart. Dominic knew he was still far from winning, far from fully understanding, far from fully surrendering, but the ember of change was lit. And in Tuscany, under the fading golden light, that ember promised a fire yet to come. 2 weeks had passed since Dominic's arrival at Castello di Sole. The vineyard, once a strange and alien world, had begun to shape him. His hands were calloused, his muscles sore, but his mind was sharper, attuned to rhythms of sun, soil, and vine. Yet even as he mastered the physical demands, the emotional currents swirling between him and Alice became increasingly undeniable. That evening, the sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, the vineyards glowing like embers in the dying light. Dominic carried a crate of grapes toward the villa, and Alice walked beside him, uncharacteristically quiet. The air held a certain weight, a hush that seemed to signal more than the coming night. "You've changed," Alice said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was gentle, almost introspective, not just in skill, but in presence. "You move differently, speak differently. I notice it." Dominic paused, setting down the crate. "And you? You're relentless as always. But even you carry shadows." Alice's gaze flickered, a subtle hardness softening. She turned to him, studying his face. "Shadows." He reached into his pocket, hesitated, and then pulled out a small, worn photograph. "My family. My wife, my daughter." His voice was low, almost fragile. "They're gone. I've spent years building walls, trading emotion for control. Wall Street demanded it. I lost more than I can even name. And yet, I thought I could protect myself by avoiding anything that mattered." Alice looked at the photograph, then back at him, eyes wide, not with pity, but with understanding. "I didn't know," she whispered. I never asked. But I can see it now. It's why you are guarded. Why you've held yourself apart." Dominic exhaled slowly, feeling the first real crack in his armor. "I didn't mean for it to affect anyone else. Especially not you. I'm not used to sharing this. But, somehow, it feels necessary now." Alice's own hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip on the crate she carried. She hesitated, then said softly, "You're not alone in shadows. I fight to protect this vineyard because it's all I have left of my parents. My grandfather built it, my father expanded it, and now I guard it. I've lost too much to let it go. That's why I can't simply sign it over to you, no matter who you are." Dominic's chest tightened. For the first time, he saw the depth of her resolve, not arrogance, not stubbornness, but love and loyalty entwined with fear of loss. "I understand," he said quietly, "and it makes me respect you even more. You're not just defending land. You're defending memory, family, life itself." For a moment, neither spoke. The vineyard stretched around them, bathed in twilight, the cicadas long silenced, the air heavy with the scent of crushed grapes and cooling earth. It was intimate, charged, and honest, a space where pretense had no place. Alice finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't tell you this, not yet. But I need you to know why I fight. Why I challenge you. I can't let this place go to someone who wouldn't understand it. Someone who sees only numbers." Dominic nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "I'm beginning to understand, Alice. More than I ever thought I would. And I don't want to destroy what you love. Not anymore." A long silence stretched between them, filled only with unspoken acknowledgement. The vineyard had witnessed their struggle, their labor, their growing understanding. And now, it bore witness to vulnerability, honesty, and the first true bridge forming between two hearts that had once seemed unyielding. As night fell fully, stars scattered across the Tuscan sky, Dominic and Alice remained among the vines, speaking in hushed tones about the past, memories, and losses that had shaped them. He shared small anecdotes, his daughter's laughter, the mornings with his wife, the emptiness after tragedy. She shared stories of childhood mornings running through the vineyards, lessons from her father about patience, and the quiet pride in carrying on the family legacy. The air between them was warm despite the evening chill, charged with intimacy and mutual recognition. Dominic realized that the wager was no longer a contest simply of endurance or stubbornness. It had become a crucible for the heart, a test of trust, understanding, and the fragile beginnings of something neither had allowed themselves to feel for years. By the time they returned to the villa, their hands brushed briefly, a subtle spark passing between them. It was a touch that carried the weight of shared labor, vulnerability, and the tentative stirrings of desire. Neither spoke of it, yet both understood. As Dominic lay in bed that night, he stared at the ceiling. The image of Alice's earnest gaze burned into his mind. 2 weeks in, the vineyard had begun to teach him more than patience and toil. It had begun to teach him about connection, loss, and the courage it took to let someone in, even when every instinct told him to remain behind walls of steel. And somewhere deep inside, Dominic felt it. The walls were cracking, slowly, carefully, and when they fell completely, neither the vineyard nor Alice would ever be the same. The Tuscan sun had long vanished behind the hills, leaving the vineyard bathed in a silvered glow. The cicadas had fallen silent, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of damp soil, crushed grapes, and the faint aroma of evening jasmine. Dominic and Alice had spent the day harvesting grapes under relentless heat, their bodies exhausted, muscles screaming in protest, yet their spirits strangely invigorated by shared effort. They paused at the edge of the vineyard, crates stacked behind them, shadows stretching across the undulating rows of vines. Dominic's hands were raw, his shirt damp with sweat and dust, yet his eyes were fixed on Alice with an intensity he had never allowed himself to display. Alice, too, seemed different, her posture less rigid, her sharp gaze softened by fatigue and some unspoken emotion. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, her fingers lingering longer than necessary, and Dominic felt a strange, magnetic pull. "You've changed," she said quietly, almost a whisper, the words carrying weight beyond their surface. "Not just in skill, but in everything. You're here, really here." Dominic's chest tightened. "And you've always been here. I just never noticed before how much this place, and you, demand of someone." For a moment, they simply stood there, the vineyard alive in twilight, their breathing in sync with the rhythm of the land. The 30-day wager, which had begun as a test of endurance, had become something far more personal, an emotional crucible, forcing walls to crumble, defenses to falter. Alice stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. Her eyes searched his, unflinching, vulnerable yet fierce. "You're different now, Dominic. Not the shark from Wall Street. I see, someone capable of more than he admits. Someone who can feel." Dominic swallowed, heart hammering in his chest. I didn't realize I could feel like this again. Not after everything." The air between them seemed to shimmer with unspoken tension. Then, as if drawn by an invisible current, Dominic reached out, his hand brushing against hers. A spark ignited, a simple touch carrying the weight of weeks of shared labor, mutual respect, and fragile trust. Alice didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly closer, her lips parting almost imperceptibly. Dominic's pulse quickened, every rational thought fleeing as instinct took over. He leaned in, hesitant at first, then with increasing certainty, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was rough, desperate, and full of restrained passion, the culmination of tension built over days of sweat, effort, and quiet understanding. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of barriers breaking, of two hearts recognizing each other despite fear and past pain. Alice's hands went to his chest, gripping the fabric of his shirt, anchoring herself as the kiss deepened. Dominic's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, feeling the heat, the strength, the fierce determination that had both challenged and captivated him from the beginning. When they finally broke apart, gasping for breath, their foreheads rested together, eyes closed, sharing a moment of fragile intimacy amidst the stillness of the vineyard. "You're impossible," Alice whispered, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips, though her voice trembled slightly. "And you're relentless," Dominic replied, a low laugh escaping him, though his chest still pounded. "But I don't want to be anything else right now." The night wrapped around them, cool and protective, as the vineyard seemed to hold its breath. Dominic knew that this was more than a simple spark. It was a turning point, a breaking of walls, a surrender to something neither had expected, and a tacit acknowledgement that the 30-day wager was no longer just about endurance or pride. It was about heart, about trust, about the possibility of love emerging where rivalry and defiance had once reigned supreme. And as they walked back toward the villa, hands brushing, hearts still racing, both understood that the landscape of their lives had shifted irrevocably. The breaking point had been reached, and beyond it lay danger, desire, and the undeniable pull of something neither could, or would, resist. The morning sun poured over Tuscany, gilding the vineyard in warm light, but Dominic's thoughts were far from serene. A message had arrived overnight, insistent and urgent. The board of his investment firm was moving forward without him, threatening aggressive action against Castello di Sole. Contracts were being drawn, legal maneuvers prepared, and his absence from the office was no longer tolerated. He stood at the edge of the vineyard, cradling his phone, heart hammering, not from the heat, not from labor, but from the impossible position he now faced. The 30-day wager, his tentative emotional awakening, and the fragile trust he had built with Alice collided with the unyielding demands of his past life. Alice appeared, a basket of freshly harvested grapes in hand, her gaze instantly sharp. "You've been distracted," she observed, setting the basket down and stepping closer. "What's happening?" Dominic swallowed, the weight of his dilemma pressing on him. The board, they're moving without me. They see this vineyard as an asset, nothing more. They're prepared to take action, legal, financial, whatever it takes. I didn't anticipate how fast they would act. Alice's eyes narrowed. And you're telling me this now? There was a hard edge in her voice, a mixture of hurt and suspicion. Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been scheming behind my back. That you're still one of them, ready to betray everything we've done here. Dominic stepped toward her, hands raised in a gesture of honesty. No, Alice, I'm not betraying you. But I have responsibilities, contracts, legal obligations I cannot simply ignore. I don't want to hurt you. I never would. She shook her head, frustration and fear mingling in her expression. Then why does it feel like I can't trust you? 30 days. You said you'd live by the rules. And yet, her voice cracked slightly. I see your world creeping in. I see it trying to claim what we've fought for. Dominic took a deep breath, the weight of both worlds pressing down on him. He knew that he could appease the board, secure the company's interests, and abandon the vineyard, and perhaps even win Alice's respect temporarily. But he also knew that to do so would betray everything he had begun to feel: respect, loyalty, and a nascent love. I have a choice, he said finally, voice firm despite the turmoil inside. I can return to Wall Street and let them destroy this vineyard. Or I can stand here, with you, and protect what matters. Alice's eyes widened, the tension in her shoulders slightly easing. You mean, you're choosing this place over your career? Dominic nodded. I've spent my life chasing power, influence, numbers. But this is real. People, land, life. I won't sacrifice it. Not for anything, not for anyone, not even for the security of my old world. A long silence hung between them, charged with relief, disbelief, and the fragile spark of renewed trust. Alice studied him, measuring the authenticity of his words. Slowly, the anger ebbed, replaced by a wary hope. Then you're truly here, she said softly, the first warmth creeping into her tone in hours. You're not pretending. You're present. Dominic stepped closer, closing the distance carefully, aware of the delicate balance. I'm here, Alice. I won't let them take this from you. Or from us. The vineyard seemed to exhale around them, the gentle breeze rustling the leaves as if affirming his choice. For the first time in weeks, Dominic felt aligned, not just with the land, but with his own heart. Alice reached out, resting her hand lightly on his forearm. Then we fight together, she whispered, a mixture of relief and determination in her voice. I need to know you're with me, not just with the vineyard, but with me. Everything we've built in these 30 days, it matters. You matter. Dominic took her hand fully into his, holding it with a newfound certainty. I'm with you. All of it. And I'll prove it, every day if I have to. The sun dipped low, casting long, golden shadows across the vineyard. The 30-day wager had brought them here, tested trust, endurance, and hearts on the line. And Dominic had chosen, not just a vineyard, not just a woman, but a life he had never imagined could be his. As night began to settle over Castello di Sole, the vineyard, the stars, and the cool Tuscan breeze bore witness to a quiet triumph. That amidst betrayal, pressure, and fear, a choice had been made. And that choice would shape the next days, the final trials, and the enduring bond between Dominic and Alice. The morning mist clung to the vineyard, curling around the gnarled vines like whispered secrets. The world felt suspended between night and day, the cool dampness seeping into the soil and into Dominic's very bones. He stood at the edge of Castello di Sole, watching the first rays of sunlight scatter across the terraces, illuminating the vineyard he had come to know, to fight for, to love. In his hands, he held the contract documents, the legal threads that tied the estate to the corporate world he had left behind. The board had sent them with a final warning: act quickly or lose everything. Dominic's fingers lingered over the crisp paper, a lifetime of ambition and Wall Street triumphs staring back at him in black ink. Alice approached quietly, her presence a calm anchor in the fragile morning. It's time, she said softly, eyes meeting his. There was no accusation, only trust, a delicate, precious trust he was determined to honor. Dominic exhaled slowly. It's more than a contract now. It's a symbol, a reminder of who I was and who I choose to be. He glanced toward the mist-shrouded hills, then back at her. I can't go back to that world, Alice. Not after this. Not after everything I've learned here. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his as he set the papers on the stone railing. Then prove it, she whispered, the wind catching a strand of her hair, sending it across his face. Dominic's gaze hardened with resolve. One by one, he took the contracts, ripping them with deliberate force, each tear echoing like the shattering of his former life. The sound seemed to reverberate across the vineyard, over the hills, into the very heart of the land. Every shredded page was a choice made, a past abandoned, a future reclaimed. Alice watched, eyes glistening, lips trembling slightly as the reality of his decision sank in. You've really done it, she breathed. Not just for me, not just for the vineyard, for yourself. Dominic looked at her, a small, weary smile breaking across his face. I've chosen life, connection, love, all the things I've spent years denying. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I'm here, Alice. Not for a wager, not for pride, not for anything but this. For us. For a long moment, silence enveloped them, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant song of birds greeting the new day. The vineyard seemed to breathe along with them, alive with promise, renewal, and the triumph of choice. Alice leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. Then let's begin, she whispered. Together. No shadows, no wagers, no walls. Just us. Dominic felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders, replaced by a lightness he hadn't known in decades. Together, he echoed, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple, a vow unspoken yet understood. As the sun rose higher, bathing the vineyard in golden light, Dominic and Alice stood side by side, hands entwined, hearts aligned. The 30-day wager had ended, but what remained was infinitely more important. Trust, devotion, and the foundation of a future built not on contracts or power, but on respect, labor, and love. The mist began to lift, revealing the full expanse of the vineyard, its rows stretching toward the horizon, vibrant and alive. Dominic knew, as he looked out across the land he had chosen to protect, that this was his real triumph, not in deals or fortunes, but in surrendering to what truly mattered, and finding someone worth standing beside in the light of day. And in that golden morning, with Alice at his side and the vineyard awakening around them, Dominic felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. The final drop had fallen, and with it, the old world, the old him, and the barriers he had built crumbled entirely. Autumn had settled over Castello di Sole, painting the vineyard in shades of amber, crimson, and gold. The air was crisp, carrying the faint, intoxicating scent of ripening grapes and fallen leaves. The sun slanted low over the hills, softening the textures of stone and soil, and lending the entire estate a warm, almost sacred glow. Dominic moved among the vines, hands deft but gentle, inspecting the grapes with care. The early morning chill made his breath visible, curling into the crisp air, but he felt a warmth inside that no frost could touch. 2 weeks had passed since the final decision, since he had torn up the contracts and abandoned Wall Street, and every day since had deepened his connection to the vineyard, to the land, and most of all, to Alice. Alice appeared at his side, her scarf fluttering in the wind, eyes bright with determination and joy. The harvest this year is promising, she said, smiling as she handed him a basket. And so is everything else. Dominic returned her smile, feeling a contentment he hadn't known in decades. I never thought I'd say this, he admitted, but I can't imagine being anywhere else. Not just because of the vineyard, but because of you. Alice's gaze softened, and she stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You've changed everything here, she said. Not just the vineyard, Dominic, but me too. You've made me see that sometimes trust, and even love, can grow in the most unexpected soil. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. And I've learned that some lessons can't be measured in numbers, contracts, or victories. They're felt, lived, and shared. That's what this place, and you, have taught me. The vineyard hummed with life around them. Workers moved between the rows, laughter mingling with the crisp rustle of leaves. The wine cellars, once threatened by corporate ambition, were now filled with barrels aging patiently, their contents a testament to labor, passion, and resilience. Every corked bottle symbolized not just the harvest, but triumph over loss, greed, and fear. Dominic took Alice's hand, entwining their fingers as they walked through the vineyard together. We've survived storms, he said, eyes on the horizon. Not just weather and soil, but everything that could have torn this place, and us, apart. And now, we're stronger. Together. Alice squeezed his hand, leaning slightly against him. Stronger, yes, but also more open. We've learned that endings are only beginnings in disguise. As they approached the villa, the golden light of late afternoon bathed them in warmth. The terrace overlooked the vineyard, and from there, the valley stretched endlessly, a tapestry of rolling hills, stone walls, and grapevines heavy with promise. Dominic felt a deep serenity settle over him, a rare, unshakable peace. He paused, looking at Alice, her eyes reflecting the amber glow of the vineyard. This is home, he said softly. Not the city, Not the deals, not the power. Here, with you, I've found everything I didn't know I was missing. Alice smiled, leaning into him. And here, with you, I've learned that protection isn't just about holding on. It's about letting someone in, trusting them with the heart of your world. They stood together in silence, the wind carrying the faint laughter of workers, the distant sound of a barrel being rolled, and the soft, rhythmic heartbeat of the land itself. The vineyard was alive, thriving, and so were they. Dominic and Alice had faced rivalry, resistance, and fear, yet they emerged united. The 30-day wager had ended, but the lessons remained, carved into their hearts and the soil beneath their feet. They had learned endurance, trust, humility, and the power of choice. As twilight descended, painting the sky in deep purples and golds, Dominic pressed a gentle kiss to Alice's temple. "Here's to our new harvest," he whispered. Alice's lips curved into a smile, her eyes shining with hope and love. "To us," she replied. And together, hand in hand, they watched the vineyard breathe in the autumn light, a land restored, a love affirmed, and a future ripe with promise. The new harvest was not just of grapes, but of life, passion, and the enduring bond they had forged through challenge, labor, and trust. And for the first time in years, Dominic knew he had truly found his home. Thank you for listening to the story. Write your thoughts in the comments.